The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcasts. In this episode, I'm going to talk to Debra. So Debra, if you can tell me when and where you were born, and if you can describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. So it's all yours, Debra.
You want me to tell you when? It means I have to tell you how old I am?
I mean, you're a lady, so you can omit the year.
60s. I was born in New York City. When I was 5, we moved to Long Island, to the suburbs, and I grew up in Freeport, Long Island. I went to public high school. When I was 16, my father decided that he was going to leave his former occupation and move to Texas. So I graduated high school a year early. That actually had some repercussions, I think. And so that I wouldn't have to start high school, do that final year of high school in a strange place. So I spent a very lonely...
So can we just take you back a little bit?
Yeah,
What
sure.
was Long Island like? So, I mean, I guess you can't remember much about sort of when you was 5 in New York City, but moving out to the suburbs, what was the area like? Was it like you see on the TV, where the sort of big wide streets, tree lined, and sort of...
Depends where on Long Island you are. So I live on Long Island again now, so it's not too hard to remember. It's Long Island is like, people... when I published my first book, my publisher wrote that I lived in Long Island. I said, no, nobody lives in Long Island. They live on Long Island. There's it's just a steady stream of townships. And when one ends, another one starts, and they're small, but it is, the further east you go, the more suburban it becomes. So you're not from these parts, right? Not from my parts anyway. You're in Australia?
No, behave yourself. Come from London.
London. Okay. Well, you're still on the other side of the pond. So
yeah. So a little bit further east than New York.
Okay. There you go. So so when you leave one town, you're immediately in another. But the further east you go, the more there's trees and parks and open areas. Back then, Suffolk County, so there's Manhattan, and then there's Queens and Brooklyn are sort of on Long Island, but they're part of the city. And then there's Nassau County, and then there's Suffolk County. So Suffolk County, when I was growing up, was completely undeveloped. Not so anymore. In fact, some of the, real highfalutin people live way out on the east end in the Hamptons and places like that. But I live in Suffolk now, which is just over the Nassau border. It's a very nice blend of a lot of trees, a lot of little critters running about. It's very pretty, but it's very civilized in terms of you can get anything you want here. It's built up. So
what was your schooling like? What was the first school you what do you call it, kindergarten and middle school? What were they like? Were they the same school or?
So I did kindergarten in Queens, PS 99, I'm told. Everything was public school something in Queens, and I think in the city as well, in Manhattan. When we say the city, we mean Manhattan, but the city really encompasses 5 boroughs. But so when I moved out, I did elementary school 1 through 4 at one school, and then we had a 5th and 6th was like, I don't really know what that was. It was just a separate school. And then 7th and 8th was what you might, I don't know which one you'd call middle school. We called 7th and 8th junior high school.
Yeah.
It was another building. And then 9 through 12 was the high school. And it was integrated. In fact, back then there were a lot of issues, black and white in the high school. Yeah. It was not, it was, Freeport High School was ranked one of the top high schools in the country. We had mathletes. I was a mathlete. My brother was a mathlete. He was a much better athlete, and competed against Moscow, and that was in the 70s. So it was a very, very high scholastic school. I took a lot of advanced placement courses, and because I graduated a year early, I could only take half a year of calculus, which I realized, because I was thinking about your podcast, I realized was actually important because I couldn't take the second half of calculus because I had to stick this social studies class in there, which I didn't have time for otherwise. When I went to college and I changed majors and I decided to become a physics major, I figured I could do physics, but I'd only had half the calculus and I couldn't do it. It was like I got to a certain point where I just couldn't do it. And I did not do well in physics that year, and it turned me away from physics. And I think I would have been a better physicist than physician in some strange sort of way. But I mean, I still am interested in relativity theory and quantum theory and seeing that other side of life, not just the physical. And there is scientific data that proves that the world is not, that everything we see is not just physical, that there's an energy side to it. It's this, like when you look at light, you can look at it as an energy field, and you can measure the rays and how it's going to react, but you can also measure it as a photon, as a particle, and everything that has a physical side has an energy side. And I was really interested in that, and I didn't go further. I should have just taken the rest of calculus, but in my family, you didn't take longer than your 4 years to graduate. It was like, you had to take your 4 years and that's it. Otherwise, God forbid, you might not actually decide to graduate. So
So quantum physics then. That's I think if I'm right, I'm not a scientist by too much of a stretch of imagination, but quantum physics is time travel, is it? Something to do with
I mean, it's serving me now because I'm using it in my books. My third book, I used a lot of it because we needed to get off the planet, and I wanted to. I don't like to ask my readers to make a huge leap to believe something. I like to try to make it, oh, okay, I can see how that happens, or how that could happen. So relativity theory is, and it's really amazing because I do a lot of research. We actually know how to travel at the speed of light. We have the equations. We just haven't solved the energy requirements for it, which is just fascinating to me. So of course I solved it in my book because it's fiction. You can do whatever you want.
Absolutely. Because there's so many books around about time travel, and I'm sure one day it will come where.
So this wasn't actually time travel. This is just being able to travel faster than the speed of light. And so
I'll do that anyway.
I mean, it's very simple. I mean, it's so you're not going back. I guess in a way you're going forward in time, because otherwise it would take you, light years to get there. But I haven't actually incorporated going back and forth through time. But relativity theory does talk about that, about how it's, how it's everything is relative. So when we just been chatting before we started, and I told you I was getting over COVID, and it, the frame of mind that you're in really determines the way you see your life, and so that's it changes your history in a way, like, because you focus on different things, and you see where you could have gone and where you didn't go. So
so it's that age-old question. If you could time travel and go back and have a chat with yourself when you was at whatever age, how would that have impacted on your life today?
There's a lot of things I would have done differently. I once worked with a nurse who said, everybody's entitled to one big F up in their lives. And I said, what if you've had 3? So, I mean, I think I would have had a different major. I would have had I might have had a different partner. I would have had I would have probably gone a completely different direction, but they say all roads lead to the same place, and so I feel like I've turned a lot of things around in my career and my life, and so I may end up getting back to where I was supposed to be to begin with.
Because it's so many things can impact your life, and it's the choices you make at the time can alter so much in the future.
Oh yeah.
Even today, what we come up with today can alter what happens tomorrow. What we can't do is change what happened yesterday. So,
Yeah, and what we don't always realize, and what I think the pandemic brought home a little bit, is that all we have is today. We don't have tomorrow. We think we have tomorrow. This idea, the security of knowing, where we are and what we can expect is just an illusion. I have two cats, and they totally live in the present. Well, one of my cats she's a little spiteful right now, but and that's based on the past. But no, I have this cat that one I was talking about. I've had her for 13 years, but the other one I brought in off the street, and it's a long story because I don't usually do stuff like that. I mean, even though I do, my animals are all rescue animals, but she's so grateful for every moment that she's not outside. And it's like, people say, doesn't she try to get out? No, she does not want to go. She doesn't want to go out. When I had to take her, I can't pick her up, but she's so affectionate. And when I did have to get her to the vet, she flipped out, and I thought she was trying to get out of the carrier. And then I realized later she was afraid I was going to let her out and just let her go. Because all she wanted was to be indoors, climate controlled, soft places to hang out, food on the table, and somebody to love her. And when she she gets affection, and that's all she wants. So she's just in the moment, like she knows where she's been, and right now, life is good. And I guess we could all learn from that a little bit.
My cat's a little bit different. He loves going out. He spends about 18 hours a day asleep, but when he's up and about, he's off out. Is he terrorising? He's the boss around the neighbourhood. He chases foxes. He brings in mice, birds. Yeah, he's a proper little hunter. And just recently, about 5 months ago, we got a new puppy. And a puppy is a little bit slow to learn at times. He's learning very quickly how to leave Artie alone, leave the cat alone. He's just had the old snip, and before that, the vets had him down as a serial humper.
A serial what?
A serial humper. So he tried to do it on a cat one day. It's so funny to watch. He tried it, and the next thing he's flying across the room. The cat's turned around and give him one. Bosh.
I think it has to do with the age also. So like cat is an older cat. She's like we celebrated her birthday yesterday, so she's 11. We're calling her. My other cat's 13. She's not on board with this whole project with rescuing this cat, and she will sit across the hall and she'll sit there and she'll just make sure that cat does not leave that room. That's her space, and she can't go any. It's like, it's as long as they don't fight each other and don't have to worry about that, I'm happy. But
so anyway, let's get back to you then. So let's move on a little bit to your going through high school and when you moved down to Texas.
So we moved to Texas the day after I graduated high school. It was traumatic. I was in New York. I was a 16-year-old New York Jew in Austin, Texas in 1977. I'd say the majority of my dorm mates had never met a Jew before. And so that was interesting. It made me very uncertain, I guess, in a lot of ways. And there's one person, she was looking for my horns, literally looking for the horns on my head. Like, are you out of your mind? And she was from East Texas, from Sulphur Springs, and I couldn't understand her in the beginning. She couldn't understand me. Sometimes they'd come into my room just to hear my accent. a lot of which I've lost, because I'm sort of like a combination of things now. I mean, you can still recognize I'm a New Yorker, but
Yeah.
But it was, but anyway, I went to the Hillel, and I found people that I wouldn't feel like I had horns on my head if I was hanging around. And then there was excuse me, it was the University of Texas at Austin, 50,000 undergraduate students, huge university. And I remember standing at this in this orientation. There's like wall-to-wall people standing there listening to somebody way up there on the stage, and I'm looking at this pamphlet, and it's saying Plan 1, these are the requirements, everything for Plan 1, and I'm like, kept turning it over. It's like, okay, so where's Plan 2? If there's a Plan 1, there's got to be a Plan 2, right? So anyway, I finally found, so Plan 2 is an honors program in the school, and I guess you had to be smart enough to ask the question. I don't know. Or you had to just know about it, which a lot of Texans do. And there were 500 students in that program out of the 50,000. And I got into that program, and that was much more personal. And then it was more of I didn't feel like so lost in the pond, and they had special courses for, like the sort of the basics were all Plan 2 courses. They were taught by handpicked professors. They were incredibly interesting. I was never interested in history before because it was always just dates, memorize the dates and the things, and that's it. And then I took this intellectual history class, and history just came alive for me. Like, why these things happened and what repercussions they had and how they affected the world. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, history is really fascinating. It really depends on who's teaching. So
absolutely. I'm part of a history group here in Gosport, where I live. We're setting up a new museum. It's called Conflict Military Museum Gosport, and it's looking at the military history of Gosport, which goes back to the early 1700s. There's more military history within about 3 miles of where I live than there is across in Portsmouth, that's got a big naval area. So I mean, we're setting this up at the moment, and it's there's so much stuff that we've got ready to go, and hopefully we're going to be open at Easter. So there you go.
Yeah.
And that's that, and we've got living history guys that are involved with it and all sorts. So it's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, and it's just such a great. I mean, it helps us to understand how we got to where we are. Unfortunately, it doesn't always keep people from going back to where we were, but that's another story. It's sad, but yeah. And so I started as a pre-med major because that's what I was told growing up I was going to do. And because I had taken advanced placement chemistry in high school, I jumped right into organic chemistry as a freshman, trying to fit into this new society and culture. And I was falling in love with someone, and I didn't care about the silly little electrons going around, and I failed. So I'm here to tell anybody, just because you fail a really important class doesn't mean you can't do what you really wanted to do. But anyway, I failed. And that was when I set off into physics, and I had the problem with the calculus. And then I decided what I really was interested in was philosophy. And so all the time, since I was in this Plan 2 program, my major was Plan 2, which was just this honors humanities program, and then I could concentrate. I also ended up studying Hebrew, believe it or not. In Austin, Texas, of all places, they had a huge Middle East department of studies, and I was like 6 credits away from a degree in Hebrew. But I did a joint philosophy in Hebrew, and then I started a graduate program in comparative religion in Philadelphia. I was going to get a PhD in comparative religion. And there's another spot, another place where if I could do things over again, I would have finished that. I would have at least, I would have gone further with that. When I went down to visit my family, they were so disappointed that I was doing. They said, "How are you going to make a living, teaching comparative? What are you going to do with that?" My father said, "What are you going to do with comparative religion?" He was not real fond of the whole religion thing anyway, for a variety of reasons. So anyway, I ended up leaving the program, going back, taking pre-med classes, and going to medical school. So that was, and it's interesting because it never occurred to me that I wouldn't get into medical school. I went to the person who runs the health science, like the pre-med program at college.
Yeah.
And she just said, she looked at my transcript, said, "Oh, you can't go to medical school. You failed organic. You got a D in physics. You can't." And, if she had said to me, this is going to be really hard for you and you're going to have to do a lot of extra things and yada, yada, she might've discouraged me. She didn't. She told me I can't. And I was 20 years old and I was 21 years old. And someone said to me, "You can't?" I said, "Watch me." So, yeah, long story short. So I went to medical school.
So you came out of medical school when you were 27 then? Is it a 7-year course?
So it's
Medicine?
4 years of med school and then typically 3-year residency. And I started med school when I was, I started, it was back when I was 21 and then I had to do a year's worth of pre-med courses. So I started med school when I started in 83. So I was 23 years old. Oh, I just told you my age. Okay. So,
it's all right. You're younger than me.
Yeah. So I graduated in 87 and then I came back to New York to do postgraduate training and then I was married to someone that was kind of a disaster, but I got a wonderful son out of it. So, who is also a doctor now. I couldn't talk him out of it. He's 31 years old and he's at Harvard. I have a son at Harvard. And he's doing a residency he started in anesthesia, but then he changed to medicine. He wants to actually be the ICU doctor, which I said, well, that might come in handy for me, if he's the intensivist and I ever need to be in an ICU. Yeah. So, right. Yeah. Anyway, so he's well on his way, but he's going to have to do after he finishes his residency, he's going to have to do a fellowship, and he hasn't decided if he wants to do it in cardiology or pulmonology or how he's going to get to where he wants to go to do critical care. It's a very long road.
Yes. So what about you then? So you moved back to New York. What was the first job you got?
I'm sorry?
What was the first job you got? Where were you working to do your post-grad stuff?
My first job. So I was working on Long Island it was actually in an urgent care center, which I ended up kind of staying with that concept because I then had a child and his father met someone else while I was pregnant and decided he wasn't going to be part of my life anymore. So working in urgent care allowed me the flexibility of having shifts. And so I would have, I knew exactly when I needed babysitting. I knew what days I would be off. I didn't have to go in the morning and round on patients. I didn't have to stay late for admissions. So, and I didn't have the stress and craziness of the emergency department. So I did that and I kind of stayed with that. The custody battle lasted 4.5 years. And it was kind of horrible. And by then it was just, I think I was just, my family was not very supportive. And so I was sort of left with raising a child by myself. And I kind of felt trapped, I just had to keep doing this. I just wanted to, he needed to be in summer camp because I still had to work and he couldn't be roaming the streets while I was at work. And, kids get into trouble on Long Island. And, so it was kind of a struggle. Now that he's all grown up, now it's like my time, to start figuring out what I wanted. And I feel like, what did I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do with my life? And, and that's when I started writing and I find that very satisfying. And I started coaching. I got certified as a coach as well, which allows me to do all the things I can't do as a doctor anymore because medicine's completely changed. So in this country, being a doctor is almost like being a hamster on a wheel. It's just like my organization now is owned by a by a drugstore. I don't want to call anybody out, but like you have CVS, Walgreens, stuff like that here, and one of those guys owns our organization. We just merged. No, they didn't merge. It was an acquisition. So yeah, which I think is kind of a conflict of interest, but nobody asked me, so I write snarky blogs about that kind of stuff, but that's about it. So yeah, so it's not really satisfying to me anymore to spend 3.5 minutes with a patient, and if I spend 6 minutes, well, I'm taking too long.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun being a patient.
Yeah, it's not fun being a patient either. No, it's terrible. No. It's terrible for both. So yeah, so that inspired me to write my first book, which was
so what was that all about?
What's that?
What's your first book all about?
My first book, I just found lying here, is called Code Blue, The Other End of the Stethoscope. And it follows a doctor around, and you see every single interaction, every patient interaction is based on something that actually happened. But of course, I changed names and body parts and things like that. And I wanted to demonstrate, I wanted the public to see what we go through in order to just take care of patients.
Is it fiction?
I decided to make it fiction, because if I didn't, then I'm liable for everything I say, and I could get sued and whatever. So I made it fiction. So it's the Russian oligarchs hack into our electronic medical records. They take that information, extort millions of dollars from the patients, and then murder them. So it's a murder mystery.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, right. It's a murder mystery, but it's set in a corporate urgent care. And so I really wanted, the important part for me was having people experience what it's like to work in a corporate medical office. But the fun part for me was writing the murder mystery, the thriller. So it's a medical thriller. And that taught me that I love writing. So that gave me a whole new avenue.
Yeah.
And then I wrote 2 more books, and now I'm starting a science fiction series.
So what was your second book about?
My second book, which I also just found lying here, is called Undue Influences, and it is a political thriller, and it is based on, I wrote that in response to the extremism that we're seeing in this country. It's gotten a little better, but certainly a couple of years ago, it was horrible. People won't talk to each other if they're on the wrong side of the political aisle from them. And, you have to believe what I believe. And, coming to blows over things, it's like ridiculous. It used to be that our Democrats and Republicans weren't that far apart. They had a few differences of opinions, but, they could go out and have lunch together. It's not like that anymore. So this book is, it's basically it starts out with this kid Joshua, who finds his way into his uncle's office in New York City, and he's covered in blood, and he can't remember anything, and none of the blood is his. And so then it becomes this whole exploration into what happened, and did he hurt someone, and who was it, and his uncle is trying to unravel this for him, and he gets caught in this web of these government plots and setups, and all this intrigue, and it turns out he's one of the few people who can resist this. There's a plot afoot where the government is literally brainwashing the American people, and that was sort of it seemed to me like my neighbors were brainwashed, like they weren't thinking for themselves, So so I wrote that about. And then it's, and then how does he save his nephew, and then his sister gets implicated, and then he becomes a target because he doesn't want to work for the government. Once he's figured it out, he's either a liability or he's an asset. And since he doesn't want to be an asset, they want to kill him. So I had a hard time finishing that book because I couldn't pull, when you write a book, you want it to come together in a satisfying way so the reader can feel like, oh, okay, like that ended well, I didn't know how to end it. So,
but like a Hollywood movie where everybody's happy at the end and all the rest of it. Hollywood just doesn't know how to have a bad ending. Where it all ends horribly.
it wasn't Hollywood, but with Game of Thrones had a terrible ending. But we won't go into that. But
it's a great ending.
That was it wasn't even an ending. It was just I could have written a much better ending. But so when I realized that I wasn't going to solve all the world's problems in this one book, then I kind of relaxed and I tied it up. And then I knew I was going to need to write a sequel. So so I wrote the sequel, which is called Beyond the Pillars of Salt, and it is a dystopian fiction, and it picks up in 2032. And it's one possible progression of what our culture might become if we don't start to pay more attention to our environment, to the earth, to the climate, to each other. So it's in this world, it's a dictatorship because there are no more free or fair elections. Nobody believes the election results. It became, just a lot of cruelty and autocracy, and the planet's breaking up. And so that's the book where I did all the physics research in, and there's the same group that you sort of follow in Undue Influences is in this, and they have this little enclave in the mountains, and they realize they have to leave. And how are they going to leave? They have to actually leave the planet. There's no other option for them. So I don't want to give it all away, but basically, the not so subtle inference is that if we don't fix these things, if we don't start treating the planet better and we don't treat each other better, we're going to engineer our own extinction. Like the human race won't survive. And so how can we survive? So this group of people manages to get off world, and that's where I'm starting my science fiction series on the planet Meraki. And the problems that they have, there are two different sapient species, and the humans we're only at like 22,000 words, but they're already having problems with both species. So they're going to have to figure that out and learn to get along, learn to be, decent people. Yeah. So
sounds as though it's starting to come together quite well for you then.
I hope so. I do hope so.
So, where are your books available? Can you get them off of Amazon and places
Amazon,
like that?
Yeah. If you just look me up, Debra Blaine books under books, you'll see them all. You can also go to my website, which is debrablaine.com, and you can read a little bit about each one right there in one spot. And I learned to initially the first two books were published by a hybrid publisher, and then it just takes so long. And when Pillars was coming out, I wanted it faster, and they couldn't promise me any faster. And so I did it myself. If anybody had told me I was going to be able to do this myself, then I would have been like, really? But I learned to do it myself. It took me 67 days to publish the book from the time my final draft was finished, 2 professional edits, cover design, buying the ISBNs, registering everything, 67 days, and I had my book out. And there it is. Wow. And I said, you know what, this is crazy. Why don't people, and a lot of people do self-publish, but a lot of people are really intimidated by the whole process. So one of the things I do now, because I'm also a coach, so I also coach people to publish their own books. And it's not like, like when I coach people for other things as a life coach or a writing coach, it's ongoing. But for this, I just charge like a flat fee up front. And then you don't have to pay me anything else. We make sure your book is out and that you're happy with it. And I'll format it for you if you need. And if you don't want to get the software yourself, and just to tell people this is, there's like a lot of, I've learned so much about the publishing world and what you can do and what you can't do, and all the, nuances of Ingram Spark and Amazon and Apple and Barnes and Noble and copywriting your book. And, so I feel like I have a lot that I can offer people, and I don't charge them fees, to like they're going to upload their book. They're going to get all their own royalties directly into their account. I have nothing to do with their royalties. I'm not charging them anything else, just to help them get it up there.
So. And that's important. I mean, have you turned your books into an audio book at all?
I'm sorry? I can't drink and hear at the same time.
Have you turned your books into audio books?
Am I doing it with all books? Is that what you ask?
Or audio. Do audio books. So your books, as well as being in paperback form,
Paperback. So
digital.
once you've got it done. So like I use a software program. I think they all do this. Whereas once you've got it done, you put it in the program. It generates the ebooks for each individual platform. It generates the print version. Yeah. Your print version is the same for your hardcover or your soft cover. The cover itself will be different, obviously, not in design, but in dimensions. The ebook, you don't even need, like, all you need is just the cover. If you want a print book, you need someone who's going to do the spine and the back as well. And it's important. You need your page count before you can have that done, because you need to know how big the spine is, because it has to fit perfectly.
And what about audiobooks? Are you going to turn them into an audiobook?
An audiobook. So I know people have been asking me about audiobooks. It's I think I need to do that, but it's hard to let go of the audio. So when you write a book, you have a picture in your head, you hear the voices, and then if you read my book, you get a picture in your head and you hear the whatever, and you make it yours. If you like, once you make a movie, now you're hearing someone else's voices and you're getting someone else's picture. But when you do an audiobook, someone else is reading and giving the inflections and is creating a picture for my reader that wasn't necessarily what I intended. And I don't care if the reader comes up with their own, but it's being fed to that. It's just, it's hard to let go of. But
have you thought about recording it yourself?
It's tricky. You need a completely soundproof studio, which I don't have here. So you have to rent space. And it's tedious to go through 105,000 words and read them. It's like Undue Influences, 105,000 words. So, I mean, that is one way to go, but I would have to rent a studio, so that the cat's not jumping on my lap at any point.
I mean, it will take a few days to read it, obviously, and then get it edited and then put into audio form, which is I love audiobooks. Listen to quite a lot of podcasts, and I create an awful lot as well. So
I know people have been asking me, and you can, and there's different ways to do it. So you can hire someone. You usually get to listen to a sample of how they're going to read it before you make a decision to let them do it. You can either hire someone for a flat fee. Now it's your book, it's your audiobook, or you can let them do it and then they get a percentage of the sales. So there's all kinds of different ways to do that.
So are you still working full-time or part-time?
Part-time.
And part-time, and what's your aspirations for the future?
To quit. I would like to be fully retired from medicine. I would like to continue writing, of course, and coaching. I enjoy coaching people because it's like being a doctor used to be. I get to know people. I get to understand what they want for themselves. I help them to clarify what they want for themselves, and I help them to identify what's getting in the way. Like why aren't you where you want to be, and does it have to be getting in the way? Because so much of the limitations on our lives are self-imposed. We think we can't do that. I mean, so that was like one of the messages of Undue Influences, is so much of the things we believe, we never decided on those things. They were spoon-fed to us from the time we were tiny children. And then as we grow up, peer pressure and our friends, and then our company wants us to believe a certain way, or our political party wants us to, or our neighbors. And then there's so much information that comes at us so quickly that we can't possibly go through it all. So we just say, oh, okay, Tim likes this. I like Tim. I'll just like this too. I mean, it's almost an unconscious thing. And so one of the things that I try to work with my clients is, is that a position that you really believe in? Is that something that serves you? Where did it come from? Do you still want it? or you want to get rid of it, because you have that choice. You have the choice to say, that really weird. Why did I ever think that? I can do this. There's, like when I started to say I'm starting to do social media, which is not like, it's a stretch for me. And it's like, my first thing is, well, I can't do that. And then I thought, okay, I am not genetically incapable of doing this. I just don't know how. I can learn. It's like getting that difference, in my head, that is this a real barrier, or is it a false barrier that I've just come to believe so much that it's like become a thing that I can't get past? So that's what I really enjoy working with clients with that. And so I'm a certified life coach. I work with doctors who are burned out, but I also work with pretty much anybody who is stuck, who feels stuck and wants to, just get past it and even discover. Some people don't even know what they want out of life. They just know they're not happy. And so it's just a process of helping people figure out who they are and who they want to be, and to know that they can be whoever they want to be. And then I also coach writers, and I love coaching writers because they're awesome people. And when I write, it's like I'm in this world of my own creation. It's just you can't.
That's the great part about. I mean, I try to write a bit, and you just focus in, and if you can shut everything else out, you got to concentrate on what you're doing and getting the words on the paper. I think that's the key is having a clear vision of what you want at the end of it, and then go for it, and having the time to sit down and do it. That's the other.
Life's
so busy.
when I coach writers, so it's like, and I'm starting to put some of this up on social media. How I ask them, how is creating a character like hiring an employee? I'm going to ask you. So you need someone who can fulfill the job requirements, right? You have to create someone who can do what you need them to do. You want a personality that, at least at first glance, looks like they're going to fit in, right, with the culture of your company. They need a resume, which equals they need a backstory. So you create their backstory, which can be very interesting and doesn't have to be known to the employee, to the employer, and can have all kinds of things that are going to bode ill or well in the future. If they do really well, sometimes, and then you got to let them go and let them do their thing. Now they have a character and a personality, and and if you're going along on a scene and this character's, no, I wouldn't do that. I would do this. Like, okay. Yeah. And you let them do it. And sometimes they do so well that you want to promote them. And now they take on a greater role in your book than you thought they would. Sometimes they do really poorly, and you have to fire them, which means you knock them off. You're perfectly free to do that. You say, you know what, you're not working out for me. You're out of this book.
Terrific. Well, Debra, I think that's fantastic what you're doing. 3 books under your belt, and terrific.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. This was a lot of fun.
You're welcome.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.